Hello, welcome to our second video lecture and our introduction to Earth's diverse environments, our exploration of ecology. What is ecology? A mysterious giant of the deep. Ecology is the scientific study of the interactions of organisms with their environment. The ocean is the Earth's largest and least explored ecosystem. Recent explorations of the deep sea have brought previously unknown species to light, such as this mystery squid. Again, what is ecology? Ecology is the scientific study of the interactions of organisms with their environment. Deep sea submersibles like Alvin allow the exploration of the deep sea. It can accommodate a pilot and two other individuals. It is equipped with instruments to view and sample the ocean's depths up to 2,500 meters. Scientists have found seafloor life whose ultimate energy source is not sunlight, but energy that comes from the interior of the planet. This energy is emitted from hydrothermal vents deep in the sea near the edges of the Earth's crustal plates. Many animals thrive in the extreme environment around hydrothermal vents. Tube worms were unknown to science until hydrothermal vents were explored. They live on energy extracted from chemicals by bacteria. Ecologists study how organisms interact with their environment at several levels. Ecologists study environmental interactions at the organism, population, community, and ecosystem levels. Organisms are affected by their environment, but their presence and activities change the environment. In this way, the interactions between an organism and its environment are a two-way interaction. The clams that live near an ocean vent constitute what we call a population. A population is an interbreeding group of individuals belonging to the same species and living in the same geographic area. Here we have our mysterious squid. We also have our tube worms that live near the hydrothermal vents deep in the ocean. What is a community? A community is all populations of different species in a geographical area. So the tube worms and the squid together make up, as well as the hydrothermal vents, make up our community. Ecosystem interactions involve living communities and non-living abiotic components. This is what we call an ecosystem, all life forms as well as the non-living factors of their environment. Abiotic means non-living. Abiotic components include energy, nutrients, gases, temperature, anything or other chemicals, non-living. Organisms, biotic components of an ecosystem. Organisms are living things, are affected by their environment, but their presence and activities often change the environment they inhabit. Again, this is our two-way interaction. An ecosystem consists of a biological community or all the biotic components along with non-living environmental factors or abiotic components. One example of a biotic component of an ecosystem would be our tube worms or our mystery squid. Now let's transition to chapter 36. Dining in. Wasps and Pyrrhus caterpillars form an unusual three-step food chain. The 4 millimeter long wasp, Ampentiles glomeratus, I'm not great at Latin, stabs through the skin of a Pyrrhus rapae caterpillar and lays her eggs. The caterpillar will be destroyed from within as the wasp larvae hatch and nourish themselves on its internal organs. Ichneumon wasps can detect when a Pyrrhus caterpillar contains Ampentiles larvae. A female ichneumon will pierce the caterpillar and deposit her own eggs inside of the Ampentiles larvae. Finally, yet another wasp, a chalcid, may lay its eggs inside the ichneumon larvae. Usually, only the chalcids will emerge from the dead husk of the caterpillar. A biological community derives its structure from the interactions and interdependence of the organisms living within it. Ecosystem functioning depends on the complex interactions between its community of organisms and the physical environment. An example of a community, as seen below, we have wild turkeys as well as the grass, the shrubs, and the trees that inhabit this forest. That is our community. All organisms in a particular area make up a community. So the turkeys, the grass, and the trees all make up our community. A number of factors characterize every community. Biodiversity, the prevalent form of vegetation, response to disturbances, as well as trophic structure, feeding relationships. So what is biodiversity? Biodiversity is the variety of different kinds of organisms that make up a community. Biodiversity has two key components. It has species richness, what is meant by relative abundance of different species, or first species richness. Species richness is that the makeup of the community. Total number of different species in the community. The other component, relative abundance, is the number of each species. How many of each species? How many turkeys are there? How many trees are there? How many shrubs are there? How much grass is there? That is, each one of those individually is the relative abundance of that species. This makes up the biodiversity of our communities. So, we have our community. How do the structural features of the plants within this community determine the types of animals that live in our community? So, the canopy of trees in deciduous forests, under which shrubs and herbs carpet the forest floor. Animals, such as our turkey, feed off of these shrubs, and the canopy provides protection from intense sunlight. So just as we like to, as humans, like to go out in the sun, we don't necessarily want to be out in the sun for great lengths of time. We seek out shade or habitat. The canopy of deciduous forests provides protection from the sun for turkeys. Disturbances in a community are things like large forest fires. Fires can destroy the species of a community, the trees, the turkeys, the shrubs, the grass, and it will take a long time for that community to recover. And each community is different depending on what inhabits there. Lightning storms can also cause smaller fires in deciduous forests and may impact some shrubs or some trees, but the community will still survive and rehabilitate itself, whereas the process of a large forest fire, recovering from that takes a much longer period of time. Catastrophic level events. So, energy, how does trophic structure of a community determine the passage of energy and nutrients between organisms? Energy and nutrients is transferred from the sun to photosynthetic organisms, primary producers. Primary producers are consumed by primary consumers or herbivores. Herbivores, or primary consumers, are consumed by secondary consumers, tertiary consumers, or quaternary consumers. So a leaf from a tree, which is a photosynthetic organism, can feed a caterpillar, which is an herbivore. And that caterpillar can feed one, two, or three, or as many as 4 different types of carnivores. We'll get into this a little bit further in depth, but this is a good baseline to start with our trophic pyramids. So how could a community appear to have relatively little diversity even though it is rich in species? One or few of the diverse species could account for almost all the organisms in a community, with other species being rare. So if we go back to our turkeys and there's our turkeys. Our turkeys, there may not be that many of them, but in our forests we may have a extremely large amount of trees. So the relative abundance of trees is very high. However, the relative abundance of turkeys may be very low. This would account for relatively little diversity in the species that inhabit this forest, even though it is rich in species because it has high relative abundance but is low in species richness. What are 3 types of interspecific reactions? We have competition, predation, and symbiosis. And we've given some examples of all 3 types during this lecture.